Mariposa, California is the original home of the southern and central Miwok, Paiute, Yokuts, and the Mono people. The Sierra Miwok's traditional name for the area is Awani, or Gaping Mouth. In September 1806, Gabriel Moraga's expedition named it Las Mariposas, or butterflies, which were plentiful in the area. Mariposa was found as a mining camp on the banks of a seasonal stream known as Agua Fria. With the discovery of gold in nearby hills, boomtowns flourished on the southern end of the Mother Lode. Settlements nearby included Agua Fria, Hornitos, Indian Gulch, Bear Valley, Coulterville, Mount Bullion, and Bagby. The Mexican governor handed out one of the first land grants in 1844 to Juan Bautista Alvarado, who sold it to John C. Fremont, an explorer and politician. Fremont oversaw the Mariposa mining district, but policing it from the massive influx of miners was impossible. One of its squatters was Lafayette H. Bunnell and Champlain Spencer, who struck it rich in placer gold of Whitlock and Sherlock's Creek, with Bunnell writing an early account of Yosemite in his memoirs. Spencer uttered the words Half Dome upon seeing the prominent feature in Yosemite Valley, and Bunnell immortalized it. Around 1849, a flood and fire devastated portions of the land, and the small Agua Fria Creek dried up, forcing the miners to move to Mariposa Creek, a large producer of placer gold. This led to the discovery of the Mariposa mine and creation of a 40-foot water wheel crushing gold ore. Mariposa was well outfitted for work and was a supply hub for many other mining districts. With famine and major conflict caused by the Opium Wars between China and Britain, the United States enticed a new beginning for many with direct passage to San Francisco. The first wave of Chinese immigrants arrived in 1848 after hearing about the gold rush. They proved essential to the boomtown's way of life, including construction, agriculture, textile, medicine, and cooking. The new town of Mariposa became the county seat of Mariposa, reaching nearly Los Angeles. A militia unit was also formed called the Mariposa Battalion. Their goal was to decimate and control the indigenous population, who were defending their homeland from the 40,000 encroaching miners. Initially, Sheriff James Birney found his force outmatched and made efforts for Governor John McDougall to intervene. On February 12, 1851, the Mariposa Battalion was mustered with Scout James D. Savage commanding the 2,000-plus unit. James was a prominent character in the story. He took his wife and child to California in the late 1840s to search for gold. His family did not survive the trip, and upon arrival, James joined the ranks of John C. Fremont in the Mexican War. For a time after the conflict, he lived with the indigenous tribes in the southern San Joaquin Valley, mostly who were Miwok. He learned their languages, gained influence and family ties, and even fought alongside them in battle. When gold was discovered in the area, James moved to the foothills of Mariposa and decided it would be more profitable to run a trading post than work his mines, which he left to those trusting his leadership. The first trading post was at the junction of the South Fork of the Merced and Main River. The story goes that in trade, the system operated but was expensive for most. The indigenous were supplied with the necessities and alliance they needed in trade for the gold they mined for James. However, one of the chief's sons was taken by missionaries in Santa Barbara. When he escaped and returned, he saw a different James, who he saw as a manipulative and self-serving person. Although the idea spread, James used abuse and illusions to support his scheme, such as striking the chief's son and then reviving him by a form of mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and so his control continued. Meanwhile, the miners were exhausting the area's resources, and word spread that there would be retaliation, especially on what they thought was the supply of it all, the trading post. In 1850, resistance came from Chief Tenaya of the Iwani, a Mono tribe, and what the settlers called Yosemite, which in translation meant they are killers. Still, this is because the local tribes told them this, referring to grizzly bears, not the people. Tenaya led an attack that ultimately was thwarted, but forced James to relocate his trading post near Mariposa Creek, with a third opening at Fresno Crossing. It is important to note that Tenaya was never in good favor with James, perhaps the chief seeing past his deceptive ways. By December, James went with his family members to San Francisco to bank some of his gold and showed a doubting Jose Juarez, a Miwok chief, how the miners prospered. He tried convincing the chief that the miners would have reinforcements should more attacks occur, but what the chief saw in the miners were drunkards, and the police had to keep many in check, and hardly thought anyone would come to their aid. Jose watched James spend all the gold on gambling, and no supplies could be purchased for the families relying on him back at the trading post. When confronted, James struck Jose, who forever after distrusted James' leadership. Jose told writer Lafayette Bunnell, "He is telling you words that are not true. His tongue is forked and crooked. He is telling lies to his Indian relatives. The trader is not a friend to the Indians. He is not our brother. He will help the white gold diggers to drive the Indians from their country. We can now drive them from among us." Unfortunately, war was inevitable, and the trading posts were burned and people perished, while an appeal went to the governor for reinforcements, choosing James Savage to lead them. The 3 companies of the Mariposa Battalion camped near his Agua Fria trading post. On March 19, 1851, the Federal Indian Commission signed a treaty at Camp Fremont, near Mariposa Creek, with 6 of the tribes. However, the Awani of the Mono and Chochillas of the Yokuts were not present, and the campaign entered Yosemite Valley and unleashed a genocide on their villages, forcing survivors to relocate to reservations. It is said that in a matter of 2 decades, 80% of Native Americans in the area were either murdered or died of the effects of related diseases. Lafayette Bunnell, the once squatter and writer, now was a battalion member, and approached Chief Tenaya to talk. Thinking himself generous, Bunnell interrupted Tenaya's march to the reservation and asked what he thought of his name being attributed to the nearby lake and canyon where they found his people. He seemed in shock and pointed to the peaks near the head of the lake, saying it already had a name, Paiwiak, before returning to his family members in silence over the atrocities against them. 2 reservations were set up on Fresno River, near one of James's trading posts, and the other at Kings River. A judge named Walter T. Harvey took a farming interest in the Kings River Reservation. Thinking little of the repercussions, Harvey and others decided to squat on the land. It was an illegal act according to the treaty, and on July 2, 1852, several Native Americans were killed by Walter Harvey and the squatters. Chief Pasquale went to James, who, although no longer in his commission role, was still making his living trading with the tribes, and called for the United States Indian Commissioners to conduct a council inquiry. A month later, James was blocked by Harvey on his way to the council in Pools Ferry, now Reedley, California. An argument ensued, and James struck Harvey on the jaw, with Harvey firing 4 times, killing him. He would be arrested, but ultimately acquitted by a friend on the claim of self-defense. Californios also tried to push back the miners, having suffered discrimination, land grabs, and violence in the gold fields. Joaquin Merida, a famous bandit of the time, was known to steal and redistribute what he could to the Spanish farmers. California Rangers claimed to have killed Morita and collected the reward with his alleged head. By the end of the 1850s, searching creek beds for minerals quickly diminished, leading to a focus on hard rock and deep quartz mining. The setting changed dramatically from colorful but disorderly miners to company workers with a dull, orderly approach. At this point, the employees lived in company housing and had to shop only in company-run stores. In an instant, the miners' tents and all the associated businesses were cleared, with only a few stubborn holdouts continuing to work with their meager claims. Other former miners took to farming and ranch life while the businesses shifted to their interests. In 1858, it was estimated that the Chinese living in the Mariposa community numbered in the thousands, outnumbering European American settlers 2-1. One of its celebrities was Tai Sing, who gained a reputation for tasty backcountry meals and quick wit, which bestowed him the title of Philosopher of the Sierra. Sing enjoyed exploring the mountains and trails in his home state of Nevada, living in the back country and cooking from its resources. He tried to find regular work, but with racial discrimination, he was forced to prepare meals for surveyors in California. He became the head chef of surveyor Robert Marshall, which lasted 28 years. Sing Peak would be named in his honor, and he was the culinary chef for the Mather Mountain Party, a group of influential men who embarked on a trek across the Sierra in 1915 and became instrumental in creating the National Park Service a year later. Today, the Southern Miwok are seeking federal recognition and having signed treaties that have been mostly overlooked. Very little of the Mono in the area is spoken of today in the park, except for a so-called curse of Tenaya Canyon, which is thought to plague climbers. Are the rumors true? Well, not far off, archaeologists are digging up sacred sites that include burial remains without the permission of the original Yosemite descendants, and climbers are taking dangerous risks. Perhaps we need to walk gently with each other and appreciate the wisdom this beautiful area provides in observation, sitting, as mountaineer John Muir once said, as a tree. This has been Biographies of the West. My name is Lorin Morgan-Richards. Thanks for watching.